been a day. It's been a day. But thank you for your patience and what I've heard from you all, what little bits I heard about, the work that you're doing and what's brought you to this project, why you're interested is really heartening and really amazing to hear. So a little bit about Storycorps. How do I control the slides? Is it like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I can just do it or you.
Oh, okay. I just tell you next slide. So how many of you all have heard of Storycorps already at this point? Okay, yay. Okay, so I don't need to go too much into depth about Storycorps, but I'm actually gonna have to open this up so you can see my own notes. To look behind me. So Storycorps is an organization committed to storytelling. So I'm talking to you guys today about One Small Step, which is a little bit different from how Storycorps usually operates. Storycorps conversations are between loved ones. So some of you might have heard them on NPR, on Morning Edition on Fridays. Usually they make you cry. There's some sort of heart-tugging elements. So One Small Step is a little bit different. And I'll tell you a bit first. But before I go into that, next slide, please. So this is just a very quick overview of Storycorps' history. I'm not going to go too much into it because you guys are familiar with the org, but we started out as a single recording booth in Grand Central Station, and then went on to have a mobile tour. Some of you all may have seen the Airstream like right before COVID. It was parked in front of CMAC, and then they had to pack everything up and send it back to Brooklyn. But they're back on the road again, which is great. And next slide, please. And so in 2018, One Small Step was developed in response to growing polarization, right? We were all there. Well, actually, I had just moved to Australia in 2016, but I was watching from afar, and Storycorps really has this strength in that we have a model that's set up to like make people connect through conversation, right? So we took that model and applied it to political difference, social difference, lived experience, differences in that. And really the One Small Step model is simple, right? We take two strangers who have different social views, political views, economic views, different lived experience. We put them together for a facilitated conversation that's 40 to 50 minutes. And the conversation is meant to be personal. It's meant to explore difference from a personal lens. So we're not like talking up here, ideology, but more so, why you believe what you believe, what got you there, the context, so that there's a more personal element and you're not really, you're staying away from that debate territory. The conversations are facilitated so that the facilitator's there to make sure that things stay on track and that nobody is, hurling insults at anyone, which hasn't happened, thankfully. I think the One Small Step crew is a bit of a self-selecting bunch in that people want to be there. They're curious. They want to meet someone different from them, and they want to tell their own stories as well. So next slide, please. This is just a nice little graphic. So this is my next question. Have you guys been impacted personally by polarization? People on the Zoom as well? You too? Have you gotten in fights with friends, family?
So we did this on Friday.
Yeah, Friday.
My dad got on.
Oh,
Remember my dad got on? And like his intro was like really personal. He was like, yeah, we had just had an Easter thing where me and my mom got into something, and I was like, whoa, Dad, this is my community space. What's going on here? I don't know if you picked up on that.
I did. It's hard on Zoom. That's so funny. Okay. So we know Andrew has. How about anyone else that has? Yeah. Maybe you don't talk to somebody anymore, right? Or it's awkward, or you know how to approach. So it's interesting because a lot of people who have come into this project, they have expressed that they are using it as a test run, to kind of see how they can navigate those kinds of conversations with the loved one and maybe approach it from a place of respect, understanding, curiosity. That's actually like when people ask me, how can I prepare for One Small Step conversation? I say, just bring your curiosity. Like that's literally all, because the facilitators have everything you need for you ready. You just need to be curious, really, ultimately. Next slide, please. What's happening? So one small step conversations, we want to make sure that they're safe for everybody involved. We've been testing this method since 2018, and refining it and constantly refining it, actually in a constant state of refinement. There is a trained Storycorps facilitator in the virtual space. They're happening online at the moment. I'm trying to get them to happen in person more and more, but at the moment they're online, which also is, has benefits, right? You can join from your armchair. The conversations get archived at the Library of Congress, and just like every Storycorps conversation, with your permission, of course. But of course, if you don't give your permission, if you do a one small step conversation and you're like, wow, that was a great experience, but I actually don't want that in the archive, that's fine as well. You don't have to sign the release. You still get a copy of your conversation through a private link. Next slide, please. So these are just some examples of one small step questions. So we ask people, who are influential people in your life and why. That second question, is there anything about my beliefs that you don't agree with but still respect? That usually, sometimes it comes at the end, which is really interesting because at that point you've heard someone's whole life story and they may have expressed some views you don't agree with. But at that point, you kind of can see where they're coming from, right? It's more personal, it's more human in a lot of ways. Then we have, do you ever feel misunderstood by people with different beliefs than you? How so? Do you ever feel troubled by people with the same beliefs as you? So it's really like from a personal angle, more so than, how do you feel about gun control or, something way up here, right? We're trying to make it human. Next slide. So we have ground rules for every conversation. And these ground rules, we take them very seriously. I once had a situation where someone wasn't respecting that third ground rule, share the time equally. And I actually, as a facilitator, my role was to step in and say, hey, this is one of our ground rules. Please make sure that your conversation partner gets enough time to talk as well. We also have, focus on the personal, on your life experience. Do not use derogatory language, share the time equally, allow your partner to finish their thoughts, do not interrupt, that one's really important. Do not make assumptions and do not try to persuade one another. So that's a really important one. And I always like to tell people, you can't persuade, unless you're like a very skilled salesperson, you cannot persuade anyone of anything in 50 minutes, I don't think. So don't even bother. So I've got here an example of a one small step conversation. It was a pair they're both from Fresno, and they took part in the partnership last year with KVPR. They were our youngest participants, Martine and Emma. And Martine is actually currently running for Kings County Supervisor. He's like, I think 27 or 20, he's not even 30, 27, 28, he's really young. Emma is a teacher in Fresno, an English teacher, and she and her husband are foster parents. So I paired them up because they're just wonderful people. They love their communities. They're really engaged with the people around them and just have this like great spirit of service, but had very, very different political views. So it made for very interesting conversation. So here's a little edited snippet of that for you all.
You are the son of immigrant farm workers. What is the thing you admire most about your parents?
To start off, my dad is one of those persons that even if it's not a popular opinion, he still does the right thing, whether it be at work or whether it be at the house. So that's some things that I've carried on throughout my life. Overall, both of my parents, what I admire most about them is their hard work ethic. Somehow they made it work, in this new country without knowing the language.
Is there a time that you can think of when you did exactly as you said your dad did, where you did what you believed was right, even though it wasn't like the popular thing to do?
I was in a situation where I had a client, bashed group of workers that reminded me of my parents, He was pretty harsh on them, and I stepped up and said, hey, that's not the right thing to do. You treat them with respect. They're your workers. Obviously, I ended up losing that client moving forward. But at the end of the day, I know I did the right thing because I wish someone would have stood up for my parents had they been in the same situation. How does it feel to be a foster parent?
The bureaucracy is a nightmare. It adds 15 levels of paperwork to being a parent, but I've always just wanted to provide a safe place for people whenever possible, and I felt like if I was able to be in a position where I had an extra room in my house, that I wanted that room to go to a child or children who really needed a safe place to be. And I really enjoy it. Even though it's not permanent, I like being a safe stepping stone in their lives. Do you feel like people who share the same political idea as you also then misunderstand you?
Yes. I mean, that's both parties. Sometimes I walk into a room full of Republicans and I'm the only Hispanic in the room of like 300. And they expect me to have their same political views. But the reality is that our life experiences are what shape us. I believe as people, no political party should come before treating someone as a human.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I think there's a problem when anyone upholds their beliefs as like these are the only ones you can believe, and if you don't, then you're against everybody and you don't believe in anything. I think that's a really narrow view. I don't want anything in the world to truly be canceled. I think we should have discourse about it. I think that there's multiple perspectives that shape everything, and I think that we should be able to see those multiple perspectives.
That is true, And I see that with the issue of water every day. I work in farming, so there was like a hit piece on me and my peers on ag on the LA Times. It was calling us water hogs for the way we irrigate and the way we feed the world. Just a year ago, we were considered heroes for keeping the supply chain going at the same time. Our immigrant farm workers were also considered essential workers, and now we're considered the bad guys amongst urban and environmentalists for the amount of water we use. You also see it from the right, not wanting to talk about immigration reform when our essential heroes were the farm workers during this whole pandemic. So it gets frustrating, on both sides. It's like, hey guys, we matter. We're the backbone of this country and this world when it comes to feeding people, up until it comes time for you guys to use this as a punching bag.
That's pretty similar, I think, to how teachers were treated during the pandemic. That's a really hard cognitive dissonance to experience.
Was I who you expected me to be?
So reading your bio, I expected you to be like 50. So you're significantly younger than I expected.
Yeah. I'm really bad at telling my own story. I'm really good at telling other people's story except my own.
You do a really great job of talking about the people that have really influenced you, but I don't think that that's like a knock on you. I think that really shares how tied you are to your community.
It's really that, my community really defines who I am. Just because I was born and raised in that small farm town of Stratford. That was the springboard for me when my parents came to this country, ag, farming. So that's why I try to share that story as much as possible.
Yeah, it's cool that you've kind of followed in their footsteps in that way.
Yeah. What are your hopes for the future?
I hope that we are able to have conversations in schools that are broader and allow for students to see perspectives that mirror their own, and also that share different perspectives than what they've experienced in their own lives and what they've read. And how about you? What are your hopes for the future?
My hopes for the future is that we can go back to a time where it doesn't matter what the letter next to your name, whether it be a liberal, conservative, Republican, or Democrat. We go back to treating each other as humans and with respect.
I just hope that we can leave the world better than we found it.
Right. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on, and you all in the Zoom world, your thoughts on what you just heard. Did it speak to you? Were there any parts that struck a chord?
What this was about for me is how much they had in common as human beings and their willingness to share that in an interactive way that created a relationship.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah.
I can't hear you guys again. Say talk again.
We can hear you.
Okay, yeah, okay. Now I get sorry about that. I had to go and get my laptop. So I appreciated the genuine curiosity that seemed to sort of drive the conversation. Like it was a lot about inquiry and like curiosity that dove into each one of their lives a little bit deeper, and it wasn't really about imposing thoughts. It's just really about extracting feelings and ideas about things. So
Yeah, they absolutely brought their curiosity to the table. I actually did very little facilitating in that conversation, just kind of sat there and enjoyed, which was great. That's when your job is easy. Any other thoughts, feelings, opinions?
It was nice to see the mutual respect they had for each other.
Could you tell who was the Democrat and who was the Republican in that
Yeah.
conversation?
At the end, I can.
At the end, yeah. Yeah.
I don't know that it was as obvious to me, because it seemed to me that they were at the end, they both wanted the same thing.
Yeah.
So, if you both want the same thing, then are you all that really different?
Yeah, it's true.
So-
The outcome is the same, yeah.
The difference lies in the details, the devils in the details
Absolutely.
of how to get there.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah.
I find that it's interesting as human beings how much we can turn on people or things. So like when he was talking about how he said, last year we were heroes, and now we are, there's a hit out on us because we're using water. And it just seems to me that we can't hold the space for both things. Like we have to pick a side, we have to choose. There are definite things that I feel very strongly about, and I probably do pick a side. But I think in the end, I want to be able to, as long as it's not, if what you believe or what you're thinking is not hurting another human being, then you have the right to think and believe the way that you want to. But if it is hurting someone, then that's different. So
Yeah. I think that what this project does, it brings forth a lot of nuance. I think it shows that us humans are made up of a lot more gray area than we realize. And it's funny when I tell people about this project and the work I do. One person once told me like, "Oh, so you work in nuance?" And I was like, "Yeah, actually I do," and I've gotten very comfortable with it. And maybe that's because I'm a person that exists in a lot of gray areas. Like I come from a mixed cultural background. I'm like, I've moved around a lot. Like maybe that's why I'm comfortable living in the nuance. But I think that what this project does is kind of remind us all that, no one really is fully one way or the other, and I think especially in the Central Valley, I think it's hard to be like hardline anything around here because we have so many layers of different experiences, Did you have that?
I think that part of our conflict lies in living in the present. I was brought up on a farm with a Republican dad who passed out Hillary coins with whatever was on there. And then I became Democratic. If you'd have talked to me when I was 18 instead of when I was 28, it would have been a very different conversation. So to get past where we are right now by enlarging it and accepting that we're all in process and the interaction changes, we are.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we change a lot. My religious beliefs have just changed.
Yeah.
I still find Andrew acceptable, but
Now, very.
It's always nice to be found acceptable. Well, I would love for you all to get involved in this project. Some of you have already, and that could be in participating in a conversation yourself. I've passed around this this form or this flyer that's got a link on it. So it's onesmallstep.org/Fresno. If you sign up through that link, you will get put on our Fresno list. We have a wait list of around 6,000 people nationally right now, but we're prioritizing people in our, what we call anchor cities. So Fresno is one of them. And also people who have partnerships with us. So if any of you all work for organizations, you think there's some affinity and you want to talk about partnerships, please do. And partnership can come in many forms. You know, it can be as simple as you have a newsletter or a bulletin or something you want to do a shout out, put the sign up link on and, you know, put some more info. I can easily set that up. I can come and speak to your community, or it's really, really flexible. If you have an event coming up that you want to fit One Small Step in some way, I'm happy to talk about whatever ideas you have, really, because I know you all work so differently. So I can't impose my way because it's impossible. And also that's boring. And then we also have the DIY model. So that kind of works better for schools or libraries have done it. So that's a model where we give you the tools that you need to run One Small Step, but you kind of look after it yourself in terms of recruiting participants and giving them a space to record. And so that works really well in schools because usually like school librarians will take that kind of thing on, and we teach them how to use our platforms and how to archive and do all of that, and they kind of run it on their own and sometimes put in their own kind of questions that are specific to their community. So I can talk about the DIY model with you guys as well. But yeah.
If folks had like, I want to pair up these two people, does that work too, or is that possible? Or
so those people would have to still apply themselves, so we have all their details to reach out to them. But yeah, we can do things that way as well. It's so flexible. Like I just want to get as many people involved as possible. I love this project. Like I mentioned before, I was living in Australia up until June 2020, and I was there for 4 years. And when I came home, I was like, what's going on? Like, what is happening? It was like COVID was raging, and then January 6th happened. It was just like wild. And then One Small Step came into my life. And truly, I'm not exaggerating when I say this. It has restored my faith in humanity, like 100%. The same way that like travel does. When you travel and people show kindness to you, and you're like, wow, people are really good. This is how I One Small Step is for me. I really 100% like truly believe in this project. I think that it's such a simple concept that just meeting a new person and talking to them can really impact you profoundly. And as a facilitator, it's impacted me. I facilitated 25 conversations last year, and I still remember each and every one of them, and those participants I'm still connected with a lot of them. So it's a community.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I wonder if you as a facilitator and the impact that you've had, has been done to you facilitating those conversations. Has there been like a post conversation, like event experience, or like where are you now situation? Because I wonder, like how has that transformed how they do every day? Because I think for me, I wonder that more than the actual conversations, in terms of a transformational piece. So I don't know if there's been such a thing.
That's something that we are talking about doing, either having the participants come back and talk to a different person, or have them talk to the same person, or make it a group setting, of previous participants, like a sort of discussion group setting, so there's a lot of, we have a lot of research in this project. So Yale is one of the research partners, and they send out a survey after someone's completed their interview, and that kind of captures some info about what their views were before, what their views were after about that opposite party. So we haven't gotten those results yet, but there is that's definitely that kind of research is embedded in the project. There's a larger kind of research outcome. Yeah.
Is there an age range?
Not really. I think if someone is under 18, their release form has to be co-signed by a parent. But there isn't really, no, we've had really young people, we've had really old people. I think like one of my oldest participants last year was 89. Yeah, he was so interesting. That was amazing. Yeah, so all ages really.
Have you ever, I was thinking of apartheid and how those conversations evolved and so much came from people talking to each other. Have you ever focused or looked at an area where there was embedded cultural just conflict?
Like going in knowing that there was an existing issue. Good question. I mean, I guess this whole project in a way, right? Like we are going into these communities like Fresno and like, you know, another one of our anchor cities is Richmond, Virginia, and knowing that like there are people who exist on all parts of the political spectrum. So I guess that's one of the reasons we choose the anchor cities, but also I know another reason why Fresno was chosen was because of the quality of conversations that came out of last year's partnership with KBPR and seeing how like people were able to talk and able to find so much common ground, you know. So part of the reasons why we pick anchor cities is yes, like we know like people exist on all ends of the spectrum in those places, you know, a place like Virginia, you know, has a whole thing with the monuments being taken down, better monuments and all that. But then we also know that, you know, there's great conversations happening and there's a great sense of community and that needs to be modeled to the world as well, I think. But yeah, we haven't really like that way, like what you're describing almost sounds like it like a mediation strategy. We haven't really adopted that yet. I guess we're just trying to like reach as many people as possible before zeroing in, but that's interesting. I think we've had like DIY models brought to us in that way. Like there was like a community somewhere in Idaho that reached out recently about if they were having some sort of community conflict and they wanted to bring the DIY model in. And they did. They partnered with Rotary and some other community orgs and did some really meaningful work with the DIY model. Yeah. I think it works best with the DIY model because it's like, as a national org, Storycorps can only understand and know so much, but the DIY model, you know, having someone who's like spearheading it and actually understands who should be talking to who, probably a little more productive.
May I ask a question, please? If people sign up, then they'd be eventually paired with somebody from our community, I mean, from the greater Fresno area, correct?
Yeah, so we pair people up. I don't know where I should be looking at the camera. Yeah. Okay. We pair people up with someone from Fresno as often as we can, but we haven't.
Or
really
Clovis, right? I mean, you know, definitely Clovis would
Central Valley.
probably be the people, you know, more likely to be the people who would be on the other side of the spectrum from my group. Yeah.
Yeah, true. Yeah, so we try to pair people like up with local community members as often as possible. Sometimes we do have to pull from our national pool. And sometimes that's done in a very intentional, actually that's always done in a very intentional, meaningful way. So like if there's a particular good match who just happens to live in Minnesota.
Somewhere else, yeah.
But they're like a really good match because, you know, they're on the opposite end of the political spectrum, but, you know, they also have
Something in common, yeah.
You know, we also pair based on some similarities, not just based on differences,
right.
Which makes for some really interesting conversations. So I'd like to say yes, we always pair Central Valley people with Central Valley people, but there are exceptions.
Not necessarily. And then if somebody were to sign up, when would they expect to hear back from the project? How long would it be likely to take?
We try to get back to people, you know, within like 2-3 weeks of them signing up. Especially now our team has grown a lot. The One Small Step team was like 3 people last year. And now there's like 8 of us. We had to grow because we had this huge like national burst of signups, which is great. But yeah, within probably 2 to 3 weeks, people should start hearing back. It also depends on the reporting cycle. Sometimes like if it's related to a partnership, my partnership cycles are a little different than the regular reporting cycles. So I usually get to people like my next partnership round is August, I believe. Yes, it's August. So I'd probably be getting back to people by July. So, but people should expect to hear something within 1 to 2 months, I would say. Yeah. Yeah.
So we gotta go, feel free,
Yeah.
if not, keep asking questions.
Simon, you participated yourself. Do you
I
want to
did.
talk a bit about your experience?
Yeah, it was, I was really impressed with how well it was put together. And I shared a little bit that I was a little disappointed that there was a lot of similar, and we talked about it, there's a lot of similarities just in terms of kind of general values. But the process itself was really impressive and really good kind of prepping along the way. I think maybe I signed up a few months ago, and maybe it was like 2 or 3 months before it actually happened. Yeah, I would definitely recommend it. I would love to be able to help kind of make that sharing of different perspectives in the value, if there's a way that we can do it.
Yeah. I have my cards here, by the way, if anyone wants to, my email address isn't on that flyer, so I should probably redesign it, but if you guys have like organizations that you want to do partnerships, oh, you got it, yeah. I think I gave you one last time, but it's all right. I'm always looking to kind of expand my partnership reach, just because I think that that's the best. I mean, I can't reinvent the wheel, right? You all are doing the work, and I don't want to claim that I know what I'm doing all the time, because I don't. I like to work in partnership. So if you know of any organizations that might be interested, I will.
Can you put it in the chat?
I will send. Yeah, I can put where is like. How do I type things? Where's
Here.
Where's the computer?
It is a computer.
Oh, wow. Okay, this is like very technological. So if I'm typing, where do I see what I'm typing? Oh my gosh. Okay. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Yeah.
And then you'll maybe send this flyer or something.
Yes. Yes, and if you want to check out it's take one small step.org/.